Today's lecture is on Robert Frost. And first, I shall say a few words about Robert Frost and a few words about his poetic theory. And in the second part of my lecture, I shall try to discuss and analyze one of his most famous and most well known poems, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Robert Frost was born in the year 1874 and he died in 1963. So, from the span of his life, we can very well say that Frost should be considered as a major modern poet. And his appeal, the appeal of his poetry, reaches to every corner wherever men read literature in English. Robert Frost is conspicuous for his simple rhyme scheme. And his language is almost an everyday language. So on this point, we can almost compare Robert Frost with the great English romantic poet William Wordsworth. And Robert Frost uses symbols. Very often, his poems have multiple symbolic meanings. In fact, the poem that we shall be discussing in the second part of this lecture has multiple symbolic significances. It is said that Robert Frost is a realist. Yes, he is a realist, but I believe that there is an element of romanticism in him. He has a balanced philosophy. He's neither a pessimist nor is he a robust optimist like Browning. But he is definitely a practical thinker. In many of his poems, we find a kind of a dramatic quality, but the lyrical strain is always there. In fact, when we take up a particular poem of Frost, almost in all his poems, we do find the distinctive qualities that I have just mentioned. Now, if we are to say a few words about Frost's poetic theory, or rather Frost's theory of poetry, we have to first remember what Frost says about poets. He describes the poet as a person kept apart from others. The poet must have a distinct and a different personality. And poetry is never a direct statement. A poet doesn't state anything directly. Meanings are embedded in the text and texture of his poetry, of a poet's poetry. He also says poetry must be metaphorical. Well, the meanings, as I said just now, should be there, woven intricately inside the lines of the poem. Poetry is something which is not forced. In fact, perhaps Frost here again echoes Wordsworth, meaning that poetry, whatever kind of poetry it is, should be spontaneous. And he says that the poet is like a rather individual who gives his creation a different kind of existence. He writes, the object of writing poetry is to make all poems sound as different as possible from each other. Once again, the object of writing poetry is to make all poems sound as different as possible from each other. So the poems that a poet will create will all be distinctive. The poets must not be repetitive. He also believed that all poetry is a fusion of theme and technique. Poetry is a fusion of theme and technique. And variety, meaning providing variety to his poetry, is always a challenge to the poet. Well, these are some of the basic points in Robert Frost's poetry. Now, he has written a great many poems, and as I said that for the present purpose, I shall take up just one, which is a very famous one, a very popular one, and a very familiar one. I shall be reciting the poem first, and then I shall try to analyze the poem, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. And whose woods these are, I think I know. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house in the village, though, he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. The only other sound is the sweep of easy wind and downy fleck. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Now, let us look at the poem. Well, how the poem begins. Well, rather in a simple and in a colloquial fashion. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Whose woods these are, I think I know. So it perhaps has multiple meanings. Woods, the forest. Can it belong to anybody? Can it be anybody's personal belonging? What does frost mean? Whose woods? Does it refer to anything divine? That nature, the woods created by God? Does it mean that? Or does it mean the human owner? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house in the village? No, well, he is a villager. Perhaps he lives in my own village. Or perhaps he lives in a nearby village. So I know him. Does it mean so? Or does it refer to the divine ownership of God? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house in the village? No, well, this part of the poem makes it sound very familiar. Well, no, I know the man because his house in the village, though. I mean, although he lives in the house, he will not see me stopping here, watch his woods fill up with snow. Then I am stopping here. I'm watching how the snow is falling. Now, well, this can have also different meanings. Meaning, if it is a human owner, the human owner, he is interested in making his profit and benefit from the woods. Woods can be considered only a property to him. He doesn't bother about love of nature or enjoying the beauty of nature. He doesn't. But the poet is a lover of nature. Therefore, the poet stops and watches how snow is falling and how gradually and gradually snowflakes will come and cover the entire forest. Then the poet will watch and enjoy and try to understand. Try to understand what? How nature works. This reminds us of another poem by Matthew Arnold, Quiet Work. In Quiet Work by Matthew Arnold talks about the agents of nature, how they work quietly. So something is happening in nature, and the poet's presence is the only human presence over there. He has stopped there to enjoy. Now, well, he did not come here making a prior plan. It was not pre-planned. But he was going through. And suddenly, the beauty of the woods getting filled up with snow struck him and stops there. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. He will not see me. Nor is he interested about all these things. Because the poet is a lover of nature, not the owner, not the human owner. Or it may have another meaning. If by owner we mean the divine owner. So, well, the divine owner that God has created, the whole creation is a product of God. And we human beings, we live here and we loiter about and we do our work. And God, with its or with his or her, whatever it is, dispassionate existence stands away and aloof. There may be such a meaning. He will not see me stopping here, watch his roots fill up with snow. My horse must think it queer to stop without a firm house near. Now, this distance is about the destination of Robert Frost, or the narrator of the poem. So, Frost, or the narrator of the poem, was going to some specific place, which is a known place, perhaps. The horse is familiar with the place. Maybe the poet very often goes there, and the horse knows the house of the owner. And there is a farmhouse there. The horse knows it. So the horse is surprised to stop without a farmhouse near. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is a mistake. He gives his harness bells, well, the bell that is tied around the neck of the horse. He gives his harness bells a shake. The horse is shaking its head, and the tinkling sound, making tinkling sound, as if to ask the poet, well, what has happened? Anything amiss? Why are you stopping here? This is not our destination. Because the horse is not aware of the beauty of nature. The horse cannot perhaps enjoy the beauty of nature as the poet can. To ask if there is a mistake, the only other sounds is the oozy wind and the downy fleck. So the two sounds are getting mingled. The sound of the bell around the neck of the horse and the sound of nature. This wind, easy sweep of the wind, and the sound of the downy fleck. So the two sounds emanating, coming from nature, and the other sound coming from the human world, the bell of the horse. The two are mingled as if. And well, it is an effect of as if orchestration. And now the poet is engrossed, and how he describes the woods. Look at how he describes. He uses only a few words. Well, the woods. Well, you know, the, the woods are lovely, dark and deep. So, but before that, there is a line. Well, the poet is standing at a place between the woods and the frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Between the woods and the frozen lake, look at the description, the description. Well, how vivid it is, how picturesque it is. Well, the between the woods and the frozen lake. Perhaps the poet is trying to describe the road which he was scheduled to take. The horse knew that road, that that the poet will pass through the woods. On the one hand, the big trees, the massive trees, and on the other hand, it's winter season, therefore frozen lake. We can try to look at the image. We can try to look at the beautiful descriptive power. The darkest evening of the year. The darkest evening of the year. So, may we imagine that perhaps it is the month of December, the darkest evening of the year. And then he comes to the specific description of the woods. Well, and he uses three words. You see, three words he uses. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep. But I have promises to keep. Now, the word but, it is very significant. But means, well, the poet is unwilling to leave. The poet doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay over here. He wants to enjoy the beauty of the forest for some more time. But he cannot. But I have promises to keep. So the world of nature and the human world, the demands of duty in the human world, and the poet's attraction for the world of nature, they are running at counter with each other. The poet wants to enjoy the beauty of nature for some more time. But how can he? He has to depart. But I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Now, well, the last two lines, you see, he in fact repeats the same line. The concluding lines are just a repetition, one line getting repeated. And miles to go before I sleep. Well, meanings are there, symbolic meanings are there. And miles to go before I sleep, well, on the surface that means that the poet has to cover a long distance. And only after covering a long distance, he will get the resting place. And he will get his sleep. But it has more meanings. And miles to go before I sleep. That may refer to the journey of human life. That, well, we have to move and move and move. We have to go and go till we reach our final destination, that is death. So death is the final sleep that we'll have. So we cannot ignore the call of our duty. When duty calls, we cannot ignore it. We cannot ignore it. So we have to move on. We have to continue doing our work. And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. So this poem, you see, how easy, how simple, and how touching this poem is. And well, especially the concluding lines. Well, that is true for all of us. We never know when the final time of rest will come. We have to go on and go on and go on unless the time for sleep arrives. So this is, an example of a poem which is at the same time simple and reflective, which is at the same time apparently mundane and deeply philosophical insight, which is about an everyday experience, and at the same time this is about the meaning of life, the basic and the final meaning of life, that we have to move on. There are so many things that we shall see and experience, but we cannot stop. We cannot stop because there is a call. There is a constant call for us to go ahead and to perform our duty. So one after another, And we may say that, well, almost existential philosophy, because, well, what does existential philosophy tell us? That we have to move from one point to another, and there is no respite, and there is no certainty as to what will happen to us, because we are what we make ourselves. And life is more important because of its journey. So that is the, well, perhaps meaning of this simple poem. Thank you very much. Next day I may take up another poem by Frost. Thank you.